If you think you're free,
then you can't escape.
You can't escape.
And if you think you're free,
If you think you're free,
then you can't escape.
You can't escape.
Jeff.
Hi, Stephanator.
So we're excited to be heading on over to Kevin Chap's house, who was a dear friend of Jeff's for many years.
Yeah, and Kev is an old school, grew up in the woods of Vermont. He is going to talk to us about foraging.
He has a program out on PBS that he's working on called Wild Foods.
Wild Foods, yeah. He's got a bunch of old woodsman skills and knows mushrooms and foraging, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about wildcrafting and the difference between foraging and wildcrafting. So
it's going to be a really exciting episode.
It's going to be awesome.
Hang out.
Rocks. Later. Today we'd like to introduce you to a friend and stellar individual named Kevin Chap. Kevin and I met through working film industry gigs and have collaborated on several projects over the years. He recently started combining his passion for the outdoors with his love and career of film and video production and launched his own show, Wild Foods. By starting with small steps and diligence, Kevin has been manifesting this for a spell, and it's awesome to see how his intention, energy, and work ethic has brought this dream of his into reality. His time in the woods as a kid imbued him with a certain knowledge, maybe wisdom, I suppose, and a comfortability in and with nature. He lights up when he gets to share and exchange about foraging and wildcrafting. We think Kev is pretty awesome, and we think you will too.
Yeah, I mean, I call it that, but it's
technical. I understand with mushrooming you have to identify the trees, make it easier to identify the mushrooms. Is that?
Yeah, indicator species. So, we identify, so different mushrooms have different relationships with trees, and most often that's what you're looking for, so indicator species. So like, for example, chanterelles are birch loving, along with like chaga, whereas maitake or sulfur shelf would be oak loving. So, and actually, speaking of which, here's stuff. Here is an ash tree.
Okay.
And we're actually looking at an ash bolete, which is in the porcini family. There's some suggestion from scientists right now that they're understanding that mycelium actually makes up the communication systems, not only between mushrooms, but between other trees. Yeah. So that trees actually speak to each other.
Through the mycelium.
Right, the mycelium. Yeah.
Tingles.
Pretty
Fabulous.
cool. Yeah. I mean, so obviously mushrooms can play a huge part in a wild forage or wild crafting diet, but they also act as the digestive system of the woods. So you see with this birch tree, starting to decompose, and you see the mushrooms are starting to help that process along. So they're actually acting as a fertilizer, as well as the possibility for food and medicine. So we have and actually this is a pretty rare find right here, which is chaga, which is a medicinal that's been being used for tens of thousands of years. So you would boil that down into a tea, supposed to have cancer-fighting properties and really high concentrations of melanin and vitamin A and vitamin D.
And so do chaga only also come off of birch, or we find them on other trees?
You can sometimes find them on poplar or elm.
Okay.
Of course, the rule of thumb with foraging and wildcrafting is, if you don't know, when in doubt, throw it out. We go by the saying, there are old foragers and there are bold foragers, but there are no old, bold foragers. So I'd rather be an old forager.
I'd rather that for you too.
Right above it have a medicinal here, which is the birch polypore. Again, this isn't like a preferred wild edible, but certainly people, and especially in the indigenous tribes, have been using this as medicine for quite a long time. And that would just be harvested as it is, dried out, and then pounded into a powder and then added to a tea. So, yeah, again, there's all sorts of.
Do you know what
value.
those benefits hold?
I think it's supposed to be an immune system boost. A lot like echinacea or golden seal.
Okay.
So, so that's
We
great.
can't use a little more immunity booster in there.
Right, especially these days with what we're dealing with. And then finally here we have a traditional porcini. Now, there are so many different porcinis that we have. Most of them are edible or at least non-toxic. However, there are a few of them that are toxic. And a good rule to live by is when you harvest it, so we know it's a porcini when we pick it by its underbelly here, which can be flecked off. But what you would want to do, and this is my rule of thumb, is to cut into the mushroom, and if it doesn't stain blue, you know that you have a good one.
Yay!
So that one is
That's a good
completely
one.
edible. And this is really simple. This is porcini, or that's Italian for meaning little pig. Again, also known as a bolete. And you just remove this pore structure underneath, and the rest of the meat over top of it is completely edible. So.
Oh wait, you have to take the yellow part off?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly eat it. I think that,
for the meat.
yeah, that doesn't really, it gets a little slimy when you cook it, so you want to remove that.
Okay.
Yeah, and the more mature ones obviously would already start separating a lot easier. This is quite young, but this should be good eating. So, yeah. So why don't we wander down and see what else we can find? Yeah, all right. I don't know.
And then these little guys.
Oh yeah, little puffballs. So I call those scaly puffballs, or I don't eat these ones.
Yeah.
They can cause some stomach upset. However, I know a lot of people that do. These are gone by with, unfortunately. You can already kind of feel. So
Those are the ones when you step on them, if they've gone, they send out the powder.
yeah, so that's how all puffballs reproduce. As they get older, they dry out from the center and then release their spore packet into the wind. Okay. So they're really prolific. The giant puffball is the one that you aim for, though.
I've seen photos.
Yeah, they can grow as big as watermelons, and just lots of food, and absolutely fantastic with a little garlic.
Do you have another way of preparing and eating those besides fried? Because that's the only recipe I've seen is to cut them up and batter and fry them.
Yeah, I mean,
What else would you eat a puffball?
a puffball, I mean, obviously frying anything, like
that's what
even
I said.
shoe leather tastes good.
That was really good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could certainly grill them, and anything over open fire, I think, takes on a nice flavor. So especially if you're out in the wild and you're trying to do an impromptu meal, getting a little bit of smoke underneath it will firm it up, and then you can actually add it to a stir fry or even the garnish on top of a vegetable dish. So
I kind of presume it takes on the persona of tofu in a way.
that's exactly what it's like. Yeah, it's kind of like a tofu without a huge carbon footprint. So that's exactly right, and very similar nutritional value too.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you dehydrate the puffballs? Can you put them in a dehydrator?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I don't know anybody who's done that before. But I mean, obviously.
We'll try it. It doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah, whatever you're doing, you're just removing water from something, so it makes it last long. Once you remove water from anything, it'll save a lot longer. And that's really a big part of wild foods is it's not only the harvesting, but it's actually the keeping or putting food by. So learning how to pickle, dehydrate, and freeze are really important things. Some things you need to blanch before you freeze. Other things you need to pickle to be able to hold on to longer. So that's really the challenge, because remember, the windows for each of these ingredients very short. So you really have to get onto them quickly and work with nature so that you're listening to what the seasons are telling you. Yeah. It puts you in a location where these wild foods will be most prolific. And, I tell everybody that there's several reasons why we work with wild foods. It's not just that they're, more environmentally friendly, which they certainly are. But there's no way we can sustain our civilization just on wild foods alone. It's more about rewilding our food, or using nature as an example to what the best possible potential of our food system is. Wild foods are by far the most nutritious, because they have to absorb as much nutrients from their surrounding as possible, and they're not being force-fed by pesticides or herbicides. or fertilizers. Again, environmentally friendly, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is they taste the best. So that's why we forage. Clear demarcations when you're identifying mushrooms is their gill structure. So this one is a polypore, or many-pored mushroom, and those are really great for beginners because though there are some that may give you some upset stomach and do you a little bit of damage, nothing that's going to kill you in the polypore, especially if it's growing on a deciduous tree. There are also gilled mushrooms, and those tend to be, you know, though there's plenty of lovely edible gilled mushrooms, that takes more of the expert side of things, and there's many of them in there that can do you some harm, and some that may even kill you.
So for beginners, polypores is a great way to start.
Polypores
Stick with those until you learn more from people who know.
Absolutely, yeah. Some of the most well-known, obviously, hen of the woods or chicken of the woods, boletes as well. So there's several pretty easy species to get yourself into mycelium. But again, the rule is, when in doubt, you know, you just don't put it in your mouth. So we'll take this home with us. Yeah. So this is one of those classic examples of a mushroom that is gilled and edible. So here, let's get down a little closer. Yeah. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Walk right across there. Yeah. So these are a great wild edible, and probably a little bit more advanced than a beginner mushroom. These are called oyster mushrooms. There's several different varietals of these, but this is an example of an edible gilled mushroom. Typically grows out of ash, beech. You can find this on, yeah, this is a wonderful, and actually, if you give it a smell, it actually smells like seafood. So you can really,
it really does.
Yeah, see where
oyster mushroom.
Right, where the
I get it.
where the terminology comes from. It looks like the shell of an oyster, and has that almost oceany flavor to it. So.
It's going on the plate tonight?
Yeah, I actually have some that I harvested earlier, and it's kind of miraculous that we still have them coming up here. This is a pretty prolific little log. I cut this down. This tree fell last year, and it's just been producing oysters all summer long. So, been really blessed with that. So these are one of the difficult ones, wild foods, to actually put up and preserve. So they don't dehydrate well. It's actually just best to eat them fresh. So yeah. So we'll do that. Yeah. Yeah, give that a smell. Flavor for aroma. Yeah, right? Yeah. Pretty miraculous. Yep.
Kevin, we've just had the best day here with you so far out in the woods, and you've given us so much information to digest, and you've really just got us excited about, you know, going out and finding our own foods. So what brings us here is you're involved in this wild foods program.
Yep.
And you're excited about sharing what you know and prepare a meal that you've pulled from the woods here, from right around your own house. And
yeah, it's a pretty wild meal. Wild foods is a real passion for me, and I grew up on a small farm here in Vermont, and I saw as time went on, you know, my family really struggle with the falling cost of food, and really watching my own family suffer with the plight of the American farmer right now has really prompted me to get more involved in agriculture, and then that spawned, you know, mixed with my love of the outdoors, you know, to come up with this show concept. And I think it's really starting to resonate with a much bigger audience. You know, this used to be a very niche hobby. You know, people would go out and pick some mushrooms, or, you know, learn a little bit about their land, but as things get more and more difficult for more and more of us, I think people are starting to turn to alternate food sources and energy sources, and we're really lucky to have the relationship we do with PBS. They've been a huge supporter of the show concept, and for me, so much of the show revolves around agriculture, and I know a show called Wild Foods, you would think, well, we're just going to go out and forage and cook some really nice food, and we certainly do that. I think the whole purpose of the show is to show people alternative ways of engaging with food. You know, from an environmental standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, and from a health standpoint, right? Not many people know, but agriculture now constitutes the third largest polluting industry in the world, which is so antithetical to what it should be, right? For thousands and thousands of years, agriculture was not only a carbon neutral endeavor, it was carbon negative. So we were actually pulling pollutants out of the air, sequestering them with soil regeneration and crop growth. And now it's grown so unsustainable through monoculture, through pesticides, fertilizers, that it completely throws that whole cycle. So not only are we not pulling the carbon out of the air that we once were, we're actually putting more into it. If we can reinvent the way that people are thinking about their food, they can make those healthier choices. And it not only helps on a personal level, just having a better relationship with your food, but it also helps on a huge economic level, right? So we've seen the erosion of our agrarian and rural communities over the past, 50 or so years. And even these folks that are engaged in monocropping cultures in the Midwest, they're not even able to make ends meet. They're being completely subsidized by the government, and there's really no need for that. America spends the least of any developed country on food. And unfortunately, all the money that we do spend on food actually goes to marketing companies and advertisers. So only 14 cents of every dollar that's spent on food in this country actually makes it into the pocket of a farmer. It's no wonder we're losing hundreds of farms just in Vermont alone.
And farmers
every year.
themselves.
Yeah.
It's just
so
bringing this back. So can you share with us something that you've noticed within yourself since you've been foraging, and how you've noticed that it's personally affected and and enhanced your life? Or
I think just by having a relationship with nature is one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves anyway, right? This is where we come from originally, right? And so many people have forgotten that, right? We spend more and more time indoors, and we're shutting ourselves off from the things that really make us human. Having a relationship with the earth and our surroundings really puts you in tune with a much more primal part of yourself, right? And so for me, foraging is tapping into that old brain, those old ways of doing things. It slows you down, makes you a lot calmer, and then you're also expending calories to gain calories. So there's this cyclical caloric kind of expenditure that happens where, you're going out, you're exercising, and then you're bringing home the calories that you hope to consume to reconstitute yourself. And this dates back before, it's pre-civilization. This is hunter-gatherer culture stuff. So it's in each one of us. It's there. You just have to rediscover it. It's about expectation. I know it didn't matter how much money I made in New York. I always wanted more. And I think once you divorce yourself from that system, it becomes infinitely easier to make yourself happy. And that, I think, is the essential part of this whole experience. So it's not that we have a lack of resources, right? It's just that the way that it's concentrated and through the systems that have been implemented to really enslave both our minds and our bodies, we become subject to those systems. And I think the more that you can get away from them, the more that you can start realizing what truly makes you happy, and being able to share through that abundance is a really important part, at least of my experience.
I agree. When you have a gift, you want to give it away and share the beauty.
Yeah. And what better thing to share with people than food? I was just communicating this, the moment that I fell in love with foraging. It was right when I moved home. And I remember seeing, a little flourish of chanterelles. And, I picked them up and I looked, and all of a sudden, out of that green foliage, pop, 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 and these chanterelles just started lighting up the forest.
Wow.
And I didn't know what was happening. It felt like a religious experience, right?
You were literally watching them pop?
I was watching them just illuminate in front of my eyes, right? Well, what that is that's an ancient pattern in our brain that we use to recognize colors and patterns. And there's scientific research on this, that we are actually conditioned to recognize that from our hunter-gatherer phases.
Wow.
But to me, it was a completely religious experience, and I fell in love with foraging that day. I think we think about getting the most resources out of the smallest amount of territory that we can as Westerners, right? It's like, how can we produce? And we either make the changes now or we'll be forced to change later. So I'm really hopeful. I'm really hopeful that people more and more are waking up to this idea, and that there may be a few flaws in the way that we're working in our system right now. Unfettered capitalism is not going to be the way that we get through this. It's going to have to take a team effort and really understanding how to share in a more productive way. Yeah.
Thank you a lot. Thank you for being a part of it. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have you on board of our team and moving forward and spreading the mycelium.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, speaking of spreading mycelium, should we get busy with some cooking here? Just careful rummaging around that fire, guys, because it's got a lot of ash in it. So I actually have ingredients. This one's pretty clean. One thing that people don't realize is that most people nowadays
And so it is that Kevin will wander the hills, exploring, foraging, sharing laughs and wonderful meals of wild foods. If you'd like to follow Kevin and check out his show, you can find it on PBS and other links and info on his website, wildfoods.com. But beyond just watching from your couch, we encourage people to get involved with your local community. Get out into the woods and get some experiential, hands-on learning with people who are well seasoned. Don't eat what you don't know, but by all means, go learn.